Thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here. We thoroughly enjoyed the work that we did with Nikhil and his team, and we'd like to share a little bit about who we are and what we do, and Kevin will talk more specifically about the results of that project. So we work for a company called User Insight, and we're called User Insight because that's what we work towards. Every day, every week, all year round, we talk to users. Nikhil talked earlier about being citizen-focused. That's exactly what we're all about. In whatever industry you happen to be serving in, our key focus is making sure that when you're creating things with the user in mind. We do that by talking to people. We've talked to thousands of people over the last 15 or so years, and it's afforded us some really intuitive products for our range of clients. We have worked with a lot of different people, a lot of different industries, a lot of different government agencies as well. And the benefit of that is that things that we learn in one industry, oftentimes we can carry over to others. Things that we've learned working with the CDC, we've been able to apply to SunTrust, and things that we've learned at AT&T, we were able to share with IHG. And vice versa. We also have had the opportunity of working with some startup ventures. So not just big, well-known companies, but also creating new products based on ideas that we've come up with ourselves. And it's really exciting to create something from scratch and be in on the ground floor there.
Yeah, and if I could, last year we joined up with Coca-Cola in the Bridge community. You can check it out at bridgecommunity.com. But it's an initiative that Coke started 4 years ago in Tel Aviv. It's been wildly successful. The idea is to connect corporates with startup technology firms to accelerate their growth. So you take a startup technology, you find a corporate that needs that technology, you put those two together, before you know it, you got a proof of concept that can go to commercialization. So they had us come in, and we joined them last year as what they call a platform evangelist, which really means nothing, but the purpose of it is for us to take our relationships in corporate America and our methodology of being a user-centered design firm to help optimize these startup technologies so that they fit properly within the corporate realm. And so we've been doing that now for a year and a half. We'll continue into the next couple of years with them in their efforts here in Atlanta to grow out that effort.
So let's talk a little bit about our methodology. If you're familiar with the design process in any number of industries, this may seem familiar, but for us, it always starts with research. Before you start creating your first artifact, it's really important to know why you're creating it. Who is it for? How will it potentially be used? And so we start with that research, not only with the users who will potentially be using it, but also any other stakeholders that have a vested interest in its success. So for companies, oftentimes that means, whatever the particular product group that is, whatever particular business segment that is. Obviously, the end users, in some cases, the purchaser of whatever that product is, which may not also be the person who's using it. Any number of stakeholders, we help to identify those in the beginning, talk to them, understand what is a win for them, how to help them be successful before we start ever creating anything. In many cases, people come to us with existing products. that they're looking to improve or make revisions to. And in that case, we start the same way. We get a background on where they've been and where they'd like to go before we start creating anything. The next step is ideation. So that's, once we have a background understanding of what all went into this product, then we start coming up with new ideas on how to improve it, or if it's a brand new thing, what it should be. Then we move into the design phase, and you'll see design and testing. There's that little circle there. That is iteration, right? So you design something and you test it, and you take that feedback and you make some changes and you test it again, and you do that until you have to stop. Ideally, that it gets more and more refined and closer to the ideal solution with each pass. Those concepts, at some point you have milestone meetings with those stakeholders that you talked to in the beginning, and you say, here's what we're learning. These are the changes that we're making to your original idea based on what people said they actually need or actually use and what they don't. And you continue to push forward. That refinement process continues. As you're doing that testing and as you're iterating, you're not only refining what the end product will be, but also what those testing artifacts are. So if any of you are familiar with, obviously web development or web product creation, a lot of times we'll start with wireframes that are very, very rough. And as we continue to refine that concept, as we do more testing, we get content from the content strategy folks. And we put that in, and we get imagery from the marketing folks, and we put that in. And as you're going through that refinement, that testing artifact becomes more and more like what your final product will be. So you have feedback along the way on each of those new elements.
And I'll just add 2 points to that. If you're thinking about trying to implement this within your own group, one thing is to do that iteration. A lot of clients, they come to us and they go, well, it's not finished. We want it to look perfect, pixel perfect. And what we found over the years is when people are giving feedback to something that is pixel perfect, they feel like it's done. So they don't really feel like their feedback's going to affect much of the design. That feedback is very different when you incorporate it into the earlier stages of design. People feel like they have a say in what this thing could possibly do, and they're more open to those ideas. The other thing I'd say is when you do one round of testing, Shaw talked about doing iterations, but when you do one round of testing, you're going to find typically 12 or 15 major things that you're going to need to fix. And you're going to go off and fix those, and you might think, well, we're done. We fixed those things, so let's just move on. The thing most people miss is you might have fixed the 12 things that were wrong, but you might have created 6 more things that weren't wrong before. And that's why we go through these iterations, is to make sure everything's working together.
So the phase 3 says development. That kind of line between phase 2 and phase 3 can get blurry. Obviously, if you have developers in-house, ideally you pull them in as early as you can. So one, you have an understanding of your technical capabilities, what they can code, what your development platform will allow or won't, as the case may be. And in some cases, they can actually help with that prototyping and testing artifact creation, so that as you're getting closer to launch, you're not creating high fidelity prototypes that basically get thrown away because they have to start from scratch in development. Ideally, your developers can help you create some of those highly refined prototypes in the development code that they're eventually going to publish, so that there's less of a lag in terms of time to release when it comes time to that. So I've kind of talked through a lot of the things that we do, but these are specifics about the the research that we can do, the design that we can do, and then also the applied insights on I guess you're right, is a model that we've employed in the last couple of years now for many of our larger clients, where essentially we serve as a design agency on retainer. So any issues that they have throughout the course of a year, they can ask us for input using any of the services there on the left to get answers to their questions. And it works really well because that whole iterative testing and iterative feedback thing works much better when they know that they can contact us with any questions they have at any point in time, and we'll serve them. So we have a facility here in Sandy Springs, just north of Perimeter Mall. It's a really high-tech facility. We have the ability to test multiple things at the same time. We have, more formal, kind of desk-based interview rooms. We have more casual, kind of loungy interview rooms, and this picture here is the client viewing area. So if you were going to do testing at our facility, it's not sitting in the dark behind, the one-way glass that you might be familiar with. You get to have the lights on. We have 3 high-def TVs that you can watch the respondents interacting with your artifacts, and we feed you very well throughout the course of the day. We test everything, desktop, mobile, tablet stuff. We've even done ovens and microwaves and refrigerators and other hard products.
The digital interface of those.
Exactly. Yeah. As the case may be.
We want to stick with digital.
This is kind of what you might see from a client perspective as you're watching the respondents review. So you see those 3 TVs, you get a front-on view, so you get to see facial reactions and that type of thing as they're interacting with your artifact. That bottom left is the screen. So this was a desktop interface, so the screen that they're looking at is projected to that screen, and then the over-the-shoulder view is on the bottom right. And that obviously pivots as needed to see a phone or a tablet.
It was a nice transition. I'll just add to that we do about half our business in that facility or partner facilities across the U.S. and abroad. But the other half of our work is done more up front. A lot of clients come to us and ask us to do deep behavioral research. And I'll just give you an example of that. Intercontinental Hotels came to us and said, we just want to know when somebody decides to take a vacation, what do they do? So it's a pretty broad question, right? And so we went to people's homes all over the United States, sat down with single people, married with kids right at the kitchen table, and watched the whole process of planning a vacation, just to try to understand core behavioral types and where Intercontinentals might be able to play within that process to eventually get them to book an IC hotel or one of their brands, but to modify behavior so that it's beneficial to them and to IC. So I'll do this transition since you're already there. So over the years, you saw the client slide. We don't stick to one industry. We feel that we're experts at customer behavior and how digital or technology plays into that. And so over the years of doing these studies and then bringing the products into the lab and refining them, we started to see significant patterns, significant behavioral patterns that showed up. It didn't matter if we were talking about travel or your cell phone plan or customer service. We saw behavioral types that existed every time we did these pieces of research. And so we got a bunch of smart people like Shaw into a room, put all these behavioral types up on the wall and started connecting dots. And it eventually led to our behavior DNA, which I'll let Shaw explain.
Right. So a lot of times when you're talking about understanding your users, many folks in the marketing departments will say, well, what's the segmentation, right? And they want to divide it up by demographics and household income and that kind of thing. But like Kevin said, we saw patterns that broke those traditional boundaries, right? It didn't matter whether you were retired and living in a suburb, or you were a college kid and living in the city, or a working mom in the country. You were acting the same way as those other folks. And so that's where the idea of behavior DNA came from. Those thousands of folks that we've talked to, we saw these patterns show up. It didn't matter what industry it was. It didn't matter what the artifact was that what the product was that they were interacting with. Folks were acting the same way, right? And what we found was there were about 5 main behavioral types that we were able to identify. And I like to think about it, frame it as a scenario where you and 5 of your friends are trying to pick a restaurant, right? So if you're a thorough, you're like, hey, I need to research. Show of hands, how many of you in making a decision or planning something have ever created a spreadsheet that is not associated with work? This is not a work thing. This is a personal
Raise
thing,
your hand.
right?
There's a lot of planners here.
Spreadsheet users? Okay. So you guys are more than likely thoroghs, because part of what helps you make a decision is having all the data and being able to compare it, right? And sometimes, in that case, even just the act of finding that data is the end in and of itself. The decisives are the next group, and they are usually they're similar to the thoroghs, except more concise, right? So these are the folks who, they're trying to pick a restaurant. They're like, as long as it has this, this, or this, I'm good. I don't care about the rest of it. If it's got at least three stars in Yelp, and it's got Mexican food, and the beer is good, or the beer is relatively cheap, then I'm good. I don't care about all the other details. Your opportunists are the ones who are like, I don't really care. I mean, I can make a decision myself, but I'd rather have somebody else do it. So they're going to have one of the other in that group pick it. They're like, you just make the decision, and I'll go wherever you decide. They most typically are the ones to delegate the responsibility of making that decision unless they absolutely have to.
Take the path of least resistance.
Exactly. Your trustings are the reviews and ratings junkies. So, and before they make a decision, they need to go and read all the reviews on Yelp.
Read them all, literally, every one of them, all the way through.
They will say, okay, well, my best friend said that this place is really good, and my mom said it was really good, so I'm going to go. Your traditionals are the ones who are least likely to try something new. They're like, I always go to Waffle House. I like Waffle House.
It's 2 in the morning. Let's go to Waffle House.
There's no reason for me to change or try something different. It's good. I know it's good. I'm just going to go there. I'm sure you guys probably know some of those folks as well. So a little bit more detail about each of these, and then we'll talk about how you can use these behavioral types in your daily work. So again, the thoroghs. They can give expert feedback oftentimes, because in the process of doing their research, they become a mini expert. They like reviews. They go to trusted blogs to find some of their research. They are the ones who are most likely to be submitting reviews on Amazon or wherever, again, because they feel like they're experts by the time they are done with their their research.
And they're proud of their work, right? They want to share it off. They like to help others. So their reviews are going to be much longer than my review, which would be "this stunk, don't go there," type of thing.
Right. So high on knowledge, high on research, very, very intense. I mean, they're passionate about following through with that research. They oftentimes take a long time to decide. Consideration, very high. Again, because there's that breadth of information they have to go through every detail. Trust is relatively low. They want to do the research themselves. They're not necessarily likely to trust what anyone else says. Your decisives. These are your typical early adopters. Again, they have just a short list of criteria that they need to be met in order to make their decision. They are often authority figures, and they can sometimes come off as elitist. Similarly to the thorough, they are usually very well educated in a particular subject area, because they make those quick decisions. They get in and they learn everything about it, and then they go on about their business. If you ask them for feedback on something, if they are knowledgeable, they will tell you all about it, all the details that they know. But they will likely not post that information anywhere. So like Kevin said, they're not going to write reviews anywhere because it's a waste of my time. They will, but if you talk to them one-on-one, they will share it. So, kind of midway on research, like we said, unless it's something they have a specific interest in. Again, high on knowledge. Consideration is very low. They take very little time to make that decision. They're quick decision makers. Again, low trust because they want to have that. They trust in themselves more than others and their ability to make decisions.
Thorough and decisives are less likely to be brand advocates. Switch pretty quickly, but once you get them, if you get them and you actually prove out that you can do what you say you'll do, they'll not only stick with you, but they'll evangelize your brand.
Absolutely. Opportunists. These are the easy button folks. So just give me the path of least resistance and let me get on about my day. That's partially why they like to outsource, right? They don't want to have to do the research for themselves. If somebody else can do it for them, then they'll rely on that person. So that's the, anything you want, honey, you make the decision, that's fine. Or one story that was particularly good was we were interviewing people about tech support. And we asked this lady, okay, so if you had issues with your cell phone, what would you do? Well, I would go to the store and ask for help. What if the store was closed? Well, I would talk to my neighbor and ask them for help. Well, what if your neighbor wasn't home? Well, I would, talk to my coworker the next day at work. Like, she was not going to use the self-service part of that company's website. Mind you, we're
designing online tools, so this wasn't going well for us.
Right. She was not going to do it. She was going to find somebody else to do that. And so you have to know that these people are out there and account for them. They will not do a whole lot of research. They are semi-knowledgeable. They make their decisions relatively quickly, again, because they outsource it to somebody else. Trust is kind of midway. They trust in themselves a little bit, but they trust more in others. Your trustings, those are your, like I said, the review junkies. They are very, very loyal to your brand. If you establish yourself as credible, they will be your fans forever. Because you've established that trust, it's hard for them to be turned off in that way. They like to learn about new things. They just often aren't, they're not always capable of applying that knowledge to their particular situation. Again, they're interested, but they're not passionate. So that translates to them not having as deep a knowledge as your thorough or your decisive, which can sometimes hinder their decision-making capabilities. So yeah, knowledge midway, consideration pretty low along with research, again, because they're trusting other people to give them the information that they need in order to make that decision. And then your traditionals, you know, your old fogies, your Luddites.
I like that guy up there, right on. I ain't changing.
Yeah. Nervous, unsure, kind of defensive. What I've been doing is fine, and there's no need to change. If they have been going to one particular government site for all their information, they will continue to go there even if it changes and they can no longer find it. They will take a long time to make a decision, again, because they don't really want to change. And if that decision is going to force them into a change, it's going to be a really tough time for them. So what we were able to do, knowing those behaviors, was kind of plot folks on a graph of, you know, self-sufficiency and attitude towards risk. And we'll also talk about a couple of other paradigms. But as you can see, your decisive and your thorough are the most confident. They're usually the most educated about that particular topic. They have the ability to educate themselves best on that particular topic. And so they're relatively self-sufficient. The difference between those is their attitude towards risk. The decisives are like, yeah, it's fine. These three things match. I don't care about the rest of it. I'll just go for it. If it doesn't work, then I'll choose something else. Big deal. Your thorough's a lot more cautious. I need to understand all the various options before I make my decision. Traditionals, well, we just talked about, very unsure and very cautious, which means that it takes a long time to make decisions. Your trustings and your opportunists are kind of mid-level, with the opportunists being a little bit more risky. Part of that is because they're putting their faith in someone else to help make that decision. Support. So, like we were talking about the lady who was not going to use the self-support website. Your thoroghs and your decisives, again, because they're a little bit more inclined to find out the information on their own, they will use, you know, the self-support portal on your website. They will figure it out on their own, if at all possible. The decisives are very unlikely to call for support. Like, you very rarely get, you know, customer service calls from them. You got to really mess up in order to to get that to happen. The other three are much more likely to need some hand-holding. So whether that's online, if it's online, hand-holding, you know, as long as you've got a relatively clear and simple step-by-step process for solving that problem, your trustings and your opportunists will usually be able to get through it on their own. Again, we've already talked about traditionals. They are going to have trouble. Those other folks are going to call and be on the phone with you for 20 or 30 minutes, regardless of how small.
And then you're still not going to resolve the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And then innovation adoption. So when you're thinking about rolling out new products or new services, this is something to keep in mind about who's going to adopt it and when. Oftentimes your decisives, again, because they make their decisions quickly, they have relatively few criteria, they are the earliest adopters. They'll get out there. If it works, great. If it doesn't, oh well. And they help inform the thoroghs. So the thoroghs are going to do all that research. They're going to wait a little while until someone has reviewed it. Then they stick it in their spreadsheet and they're like, okay, well, is this really better than what I'm already using, or these other options? And then they'll make the decision. Your opportunists, they kind of sit in between because They will sometimes offset or off-put that decision to a decisive who's already had experience with that new service, and sometimes they'll just put it off. So one of the things about opportunities is they will kind of wait to the last minute in order to make a decision. So the very last possible minute, like I'm moving tomorrow and I haven't really figured out who my new internet provider is going to be at my thing, and I should probably figure that out because I work from home and I won't be able to work if I if I don't have internet when I get there. Like they'll wait till the last minute. So once they get there, they'll probably, knock on the neighbor's door and be like, "Hey, who do you have?" and sign up with that. Your trustings, they're kind of late. Again, they're looking for reviews, so a lot of the reviews that the thoroughs are going to write, they will read them and then make their decision. And then, again, your traditionals, they may or may not ever get on board unless they just have to. And then they'll do so grudgingly.
What's your next slide? I can't remember.
Yeah, that was
that's what I thought. Go back to one more. So yeah, I'll use that as a transition. But what's the point in all this, really? So you guys can use this too, right? I mean, these are some basics behind these DNAs. Are a lot of work, a lot of design patterns, a lot of best practices that Shaw and the rest of our team has put together over the last probably 5 years. But we use it, I'm going to show you in a second how. We use it, one, to explain feedback on your products. So when we get them in our lab and they say, well, I don't like this page, and we know who they are, and we do. We can ask a couple questions and put you in one of these pretty quickly. Then we can figure out why is it that you don't like this page, and what is it you need to be able to use this type of information. And that's how we use it, right? Because you can design for all 5 of these at the same time if you really wanted to. Keep in mind, I have this conversation with big brands all the time. You have to figure out who your customer is. And knowing who your customer is not is a really good start, right? Because you're just not going to hit everybody. But once you do figure out who you want to target, then using these best practices, if you will, could help you. And I'll give you just kind of a small example, but if your boss comes in and says, all right, Nikhil comes in and says, we're doing a redesign and we're changing our site totally, and I want you to target women with children. It's a little tough for me to figure out what a woman with children actually wants, right? So, but if he says, and I want you to target people who do a lot of research and people who are decisive about their positions so that they can influence through social media what we've designed on here, well, now you've got something that's a little bit more tangible to put your teeth into. And we're not saying to get rid of segmentation or demographics or anything like that. Those are all still important. But these can be used as a basis by which to start designing for things. And I'll show you a couple examples. Right, so they wanted us to look at a couple different web properties to try to start to inform some of these redesign efforts and give some best practices around how do you handle certain design interactions or content, imagery, and the like. Should be good to know that the deliverable was 90-something pages in a PowerPoint, and I'm not going to show you 90 pages in a PowerPoint. So I asked my team to bake it down to a few, and I'm actually going to hop around a little bit more just for time purposes. But basically for this particular project, what we wanted to do was incorporate a couple of our methodologies, an expert review, which is really just somebody like Shaw on our team going through and looking at it from a user's perspective, kind of a best practice around design and content, and then applying some of our behavior DNA. We also did some analytics around your Google Analytics just to see if we could get a sense for where there might be problems. Talk a little bit about that. Apply some best practices and set up the research based on that. That can inform the research. do the research, and then come up with some recommendations. For today, I'm really just going to focus on a couple different high-level findings just to illustrate to you guys how this works, and we won't go into any solutioning around that.
So we did do some design recommendations, but like Kevin said, we're not going to talk about those today.
So when we looked at Google Analytics organic search, not paid search, made up the majority of where people were going. I think what's important, you know, a lot of our clients come to us and go, hey, we're doing a new hotel detail page, show us how to redesign it. We're like, whoa, you know, where are they coming from? Did they come from a search results on holidayinn.com, or did they come from a secondary page results from google.com? You know, those are two different things, right? So we need to understand the user journey. Nikhil talked about this earlier on from the beginning, and what journey are we solving for? Or journeys, could be multiple journeys, right? All right, so Nikhil made this point too. He made a lot of my points today, by the way, so thanks for that. You know, we see this with a lot of our brands, and what I like to tell our brands is, look, people want to see themselves in the digital experiences you build, and they don't see you as a corporation with 7 different departments that have put together this massive web property, right? They don't see the government as multiple agencies. They see the Georgia state government as the Georgia state government, and they just assume you guys are communicating, right? We think, right? So it's confusing when they go to do something in one area, and then they pop over to a different area, and that interaction is totally different. They learned in one area how to do it, and then they go to do almost the exact same thing in a different area, and it's different. And what that does is create mistrust. It creates anxiety, actually, for some of these folks. So, you know, it's important to understand that anytime you can create cohesiveness in your experiences, and like Nikhil mentioned earlier, even making it ubiquitous where they're not popping from site to site, but maybe doing something across 3 agencies in one area, it's a big win. Right, so we looked at some of the Google Analytics, saw that Georgia.gov is doing quite well with their analytics, 5 million tracked visitors. Saw that we had a pretty high bounce rate. But I pull this slide up simply to make a point. You can't rely only on analytics to make your decisions. You know, one thing to note is that a lot of people have this site as their default homepage. So if they're opening it up every day and going straight to Google, that's a bounce. So keep those things in mind. Right, so we applied some of our behavior DNA, which we just talked about. We can keep going from there. Right, so if you look at organic search, this is what I was talking about. You can start to think about how are we going to attack this for each one of the behavioral types, and we'll talk about the opportunities today. Right, as Shaw said, they're in flight mode. They're going as fast as they can. They're not looking to research. They're making a decision today. They're trying to get it done today. So things like photos, chunked information, how-tos, people who ask also saw this. These types of things lead them to believe that, hey, this is a quick way to get this done. Steps, quick steps, 1, 2, 3, you know, easy way to get your DMV verbiage, right? That's an opportunist. And they're going fast. So when they find their search results, they're not going to be able to discern the difference. They may or may not, but typically won't discern the difference between a .gov and a .org. Don't care, really. If I can go to .org and I can get my information quicker, I'm going to do it, right?
So obviously that becomes an issue if .org is obviously not a government site, and they've got other aims and goals for the people who visit their site. And that will lead your opportunities to be distrustful about the DMV in general, even when they do finally get to the correct .gov site.
That's where a lot of misinformation comes from, absolutely. So right, when they get to the DMV, there's a lot going on here. You got a left nav that's got some direction. You got a top nav that's got some direction. You got a search bar. You got a disclaimer up there they'll never read. They never see that. I mean, boom, went right past it. And they're looking for a CTA, a call to action, which is please enter your zip code. So before they do anything else, it's 30082, boom, and they're off this page, right? That's how an opportunist works. And if you understand that, that's okay, right? Because what you need to understand is that typically speaking, once you get from this page to the next, you're going to need to get somebody into steps pretty quick or you're going to lose them. Right, so opportunists is easily overwhelmed, too much information, they can't and won't process it. I should say they can't. They absolutely can process it. They just don't want to. They like to do everything at the same time. They're very much multitaskers. Found a lot of real estate agents, I don't know, or opportunists. You know, features to include images, interactive chat, search boxes. So let's talk about that just for a second. I think we have it in a minute, but search is going to mostly be your decisives and thorough,s and some of your opportunists, right? Trusting and traditionals typically aren't going to search because they're not sure what to search on. So they become your browsers. And easy go-to steps along the way is how you get them there. Easy go-to steps, it doesn't work for decisives and it doesn't work for thorough,s because they actually do need some information. So summary information with the ability to dive in deeper works for thorough,s.
I've been putting this off, but I lost my job last week and I need to figure out if I'm eligible for unemployment. Hopefully I can find a quick answer. I'm not even sure what to search on or where to look. I hope I can find this info quick online. I don't want to have to go into an office or call anybody. I'd like to be able to take care of everything all at once. If I could pay someone to expedite it, I would. I'm looking for guidance and comprehensive steps that I could follow online. I'd love a way to easily send the information to my phone. I'll just copy and paste a few things into text messages to myself so I can quickly pull it up while I'm out.
So this was interesting. Okay, so what we do after all that was done is we set up the protocols to have people come in to our lab and we'll take them through various scenarios. Our researcher is in the room with the participant. We come in there and set up a particular scenario, say that you came to this site and you're looking for the DMV. Kind of do a free explore and tell me what you think about this site. This was interesting feedback. You know, this is why we do this, because we get these little aha nuggets, right?
Let's say in one of your searches you ended up on this page. What do you think about what you see here?
It seems very clear cut, but I don't. Oh, there's a Liberty. I didn't know there was a Liberty Plaza in Atlanta. I was like, why does that look like the statue? Yeah. Like when I saw that, I don't think Georgia and I don't think Atlanta when I first saw that. I don't really. I mean, and I've not been here but about 6 or 7 years, but I've never even seen that. Mm-hmm. And so I don't necessarily associate that with Georgia or Atlanta. I was like, what are they trying to say? We're free in Georgia? Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was the first thing that it actually really stood out to me. I didn't understand why that was there.
Okay.
An opportunist is going to associate imagery with what she can do right away, right? And where she is. Because remember, she didn't read the top. And she didn't read the side. And she didn't read the top nav, right? So imagery really pops for opportunists. So you have to be very careful about what you throw up there. Right, so some more findings. These were interesting. Majority of users land directly on this page, 61%, 68% also left from this page. Almost everyone went to the affiliated agencies. Right, so this is a form, right? This is a form. It's in your content management system, so you put something in and it goes into each one of these areas. But you have to be purposeful about what do you want to put in those areas and why are people here looking for what they're looking for. And it turns out a lot of people were looking for some of the other agencies to get additional information. If you go to the next slide, one of the things we found here is that people coming here were not exactly ready to go get a gun. They wanted to learn more about being a gun owner, right? But the call to action here is go get a gun. And so what you need over here is some more links to information about being a gun owner, right? And so if we understand what people are gonna do on this page, or if we know who we're targeting, a decisive, a thorough, an opportunist, we can put different elements on this page that each one of them will like, right? Because the opportunist is never going to read this. Decisive and thorough probably would, especially because you got FAQs down here, additional information up there for the thorough. But you want some quick links over here too for the opportunist and the decisive. So I talked about search. I got about 5 or 10 minutes or so. Talked about search before. This is good. So, and this tested well, by the way, right? So we've got search and it's prominent over Lady Liberty. But we've also got some quick popular topics, right? So your decisives and thorough can do their search, and they will. Your opportunists and your trusting, maybe your traditional, can go to your popular topics.
So let's say in one of those searches it brought you to this page. I just want to get your initial thoughts if you landed on this page.
Okay. First off, just coming off, it's good. It has popular topics. So if you're coming to a Georgia Gov, it's mostly stuff that people come on here for. So it's right there, front and center. It's in bold. So I like that.
Right. So even on the mobile, we tested on both web and mobile. This tested really well with opportunist and trusting. They felt like that other people were searching on these things. I must be able to find the information I need. It's clean, it's concise. Whereas the decisives and thoroughs were going straight to the search button.
What do you think about the search results on here?
Rather have like an interactive pop-up bar saying, hey, what would you need help today? And then type it in, and the information will pop up.
And keep you here.
Yeah.
And tell me, what's the benefit of that versus kind of the way that search worked?
They would probably like narrow it down the keyword search and send me a link that is referred by them and like recommended by them.
Yeah.
Instead of me like, putting a keyword here and read like 10 or 12.
Yeah.
Is too time consuming.
So one of our points here is simply that, yes, Google Analytics can tell you a lot about the story. Data tells you who, what, where, when, and how. It just doesn't tell you why. And what we do gets you the why. And we believe without the why, you're kind of guessing at what the solution should be, right? Which could be fine. I mean, if you're a data company and you're able to do A/B testing all day long and maximize an experience, we've got plenty of clients like that. I don't think that's who you guys are. But more companies than not need to understand why they're making changes, or they could have some issues with those changes. And that's why we do one-on-one testing with people.
Yep. And part of that one-on-one testing also, again, goes back to helping us identify which of those behavioral types you are, right? So one of the things that we can do, if you know which behavioral types you're targeting, we can make sure that we're recruiting just those folks. And so we can get input from those specific behavioral types on specific parts of your site or your product, and make sure that you're serving them the way they want to be served, right? You're getting them the information that they need in order to make their decision or make their purchase or whatever the case may be, the quickest way with the least amount of hassle on their end. And that's something that you just can't get with analytics.
That's right. So we have all different types of devices. We usually like to use their phone if we can, because it's more comfortable for them and they know how things are set up on it. And you want to you don't want to spend 15 minutes trying to get them to something on the phone, right? So we typically use our own devices when it's something financial or there's personal information. We have to dummy that information. Or it's a prototype, so we have to download it before we actually do it. Any other situation, we like to go with their device.
But we
first.
always ask, in part of the warm-up questions, we always ask them which device did they use, and even in the screening process when we're scheduling people to come, we get that input about what devices they use and any other background information that's related to the topic of study, so that in the case where we are showing them a prototype, we know that they're an Android user, then we give them an Android phone. Because people get hung up on simple navigation stuff from phone operating systems.
Yeah, and I might just point out that if you've never done this before, it doesn't take that many people, 10 maybe, to see the patterns across the feedback. You just want to be very consistent about the tasks that you set up and your follow-up questions, and don't lead people. And if you don't do those things, if you just set up a task and tell them to talk out loud and tell you what they're doing and why they're doing it, you'll start to see the patterns very quickly of what people get and don't get, or what's missing from your experience.
To Kevin's point, you can get significant patterns developed in as few as 10 people. No, it's not statistically significant, but the type of content, the type of information that you're getting from them can be just as critical in terms of moving in one direction or another. We had a study last week where we interviewed 10 people. It was for a company that's doing a rebranding. And they had they had a potential name for the new company, and then some logo designs and that type of thing. And we told them the name, and 10 out of 10 people were like, "That's a horrible name. You should not use that name in association with this product at all. That's just bad. Bad, bad, bad. Kill it with fire." So, it's not statistically significant. Yes, number 11 could have been, yeah, that's a great name. But
it was conclusive.
It was conclusive, right. And we took that information back to, to the stakeholders for the company. And they're like, well, 10 out of 10 is hard to turn a blind eye to.
All right, well, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.